Hi, everyone. I'm Jelani. As Amados introduced me, thanks for the introduction. I'm currently a professor, a computer science professor at the University of California at Berkeley. If you're not familiar with, I guess, the layout of the U.S., Berkeley is in the Bay Area of California, Northern California, right next to San Francisco, not far, maybe like 20 minutes by car from San Francisco. I just finished my third year as a professor at UC Berkeley, entering now my fourth year. And as Amados mentioned, I was previously a professor of computer science at Harvard University, and I was there for 6 years. Starting from the beginning, perhaps, this is now like where I am now, but let me start from the beginning. I was born in California. My father is American. My mother is Ethiopian from Addis Ababa. And I lived in California until I was in Los Angeles, until I was 6 years old. And then at the age of 6, our family moved to the Caribbean. And so you might not have heard of it. It's a small island called St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So it's not too far from, like Cuba and Jamaica. It's all in the same sea. That's actually where I am right now today. I'm actually in my parents' house, visiting them right now, in the Caribbean, in the Virgin Islands. If I look out my window, I can see the ocean in front of me, actually. So I was here my whole schooling from age 6 until high school, and I graduated from high school here in St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. And right after I graduated, I went to college at MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And while I was there, I double majored in math and computer science. And then I stayed 1 year extra to do a master's degree in computer science. And then I stayed an additional 5 years to do my PhD in computer science. So all of my degrees from university, bachelor's, master's, and PhD, were all from MIT. And then when I was a final year PhD student at MIT, I applied for jobs, and that's actually when I was hired by Harvard. But I asked Harvard for permission to delay starting that job for 2 years because I wanted to do other things in those 2 years. So I spent 1 semester in Berkeley and a year and a half at Princeton and the Institute for Advanced Study. Just out of curiosity, has anyone here ever heard of the Institute for Advanced Study? Maybe type in the chat yes or no. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else have? No. Who's heard of Albert Einstein? Anyone heard of Albert Einstein? Probably, right? I mean, he's a celebrity. But have you ever asked the question, where did Albert Einstein work? Who paid him his salary? Does anyone know the answer to that question? And what? All right, so if you watched the documentary, then what did you learn from the documentary? What was his job? Okay, but who was paying him to think? So I'm seeing in the chat Princeton University. That's not correct. It's not Princeton University. Well, he moved to the United States because, I mean, that was around the time of the Holocaust, right? So the Nazis were killing Jews. He was Jewish. Okay, so I can answer this question. So basically, he worked at IS, the Institute for Advanced Study, which is a research institute in the city of Princeton, but it's not, there's a city called Princeton, and in that city, there's a university called Princeton University. But the university is named, I guess, I don't know which got the name first, the city or the university, but he worked in the city of Princeton, but he did not work for Princeton University. And the reason he didn't work for Princeton University is because that was a time when there was a lot of discrimination at American universities. So Harvard University, Princeton University, a lot of these famous universities refused to hire Jewish professors. So Albert Einstein could not be hired by Princeton because he was Jewish. So there was a wealthy family in New Jersey that was a Jewish family, And they were convinced to basically donate money to start a research center, a research institute that could hire a lot of these very talented Jewish thinkers or Jewish researchers, people like Einstein and others, because they couldn't get jobs at universities. So that's actually where Einstein worked at IAS. So I spent a year and a half where the first part of my time I was at Princeton University, and the second part I was at IAS. It's basically the same place where Einstein was working. And then once I finished that, then I moved to Harvard, and I was at Harvard for 6 years. Now, Amarot mentioned Addis Coder. I started Addis Coder immediately after I graduated from my PhD. So this was 11 years ago, basically July 2011. I had just finished my PhD. I was about to start working, and I had a summer that was basically free time. And I decided as I mentioned, I'm half Ethiopian. I decided that I would go to Addis Ababa to visit some of my relatives, my cousins, my uncles, other relatives, friends. And while I was there, I thought, well, why don't I do some kind of volunteering while I'm in Ethiopia visiting my family. And ultimately, I was considering other things at first, but ultimately I decided to make a high school program. And that's when I made Addis Coder. And it was a 4-week program, Monday through Friday, for the whole 4 weeks. And I was not just teaching kind of intro coding, I was teaching algorithms, which is more advanced computer science. Usually you don't learn it until university. I had a little more than 80 students. They were all from Addis Ababa at that time. And I mean, they did really well. If I look at the trajectory of those students now, many of them either finished the PhD, or there are several of them who are now doing their PhDs. The majority of them, I think, stayed in Ethiopia and are working there now. There were some who decided to come abroad. So that summer, 2 of them ended up going to MIT, 3 to Princeton, 1 to Harvard. Now, many of them are working for companies like Google. We've had ones go to Facebook, to Microsoft, to AMD, like kind of very big, influential technology companies. And then when I started running the program more often, one thing I noticed when I ran the program in 2011 is that even though the students were very strong, they were majority were from private schools like St. Joseph's School, Nazareth School, Cathedral, School of Tomorrow, etc. Ethio Parents. And, I don't have anything against private schools. I went to a private school when I was a kid, but, the majority of Ethiopians don't go to private school. The majority of Ethiopians go to government school. And Addis Coder was a free program, right? There's no cost. So it kind of bothered me that there was this free opportunity, and for some reason, the government school students were not taking advantage of it. So after that, I decided to partner with the government, working with the Ministry of Education, and also working with, at that time, the Mudless Foundation, to basically ensure that we were getting majority government school students to apply and to participate. And then also we expanded the program, not just to Addis Ababa, but actually, starting from the second time onward, the vast majority of students in Addis Coder are not from Addis Ababa. Like less than 10% are from Addis Ababa. The rest are from all over the country. And we provide the dorm rooms, we provide the food, we pay for their transportation to come from their city to Addis to participate in the program. And we grew the size, so it's not 80 students anymore. Now it's more like 175. And also, instead of 2 hours a day or 2.5 hours a day of class, it's like 8 hours a day. So it's much more involved and intense. We unfortunately, everyone was ready to go in 2020. We had to cancel at the last minute because of COVID. And there were some also COVID restrictions from UC Berkeley and from other places in 2021. Basically, UC Berkeley wouldn't let me, bring students from UC Berkeley to serve as teaching assistants. And there were some logistical problems, again, because of COVID. So we also had to cancel in 2021. And then this summer, I was looking forward to starting it again. But then, I guess due to the situation with the political situation and the war that's going on right now, that presented some challenges. Like, for example, I mentioned that we have been working with the Mala Zenawi Foundation, but I think they're currently not operating at the moment because of what's going on with the political situation. So with the war. So we're now. I mean, I've been in discussion now directly with the Ministry of Education to try to make sure that we can bring it back next summer. So my hope is that next summer we'll have Audiscoder back up and running again. So anyway, that's a little bit about me, a little bit about Audiscoder. I'm happy to, I guess, talk about anything, discuss whatever you'd like. Maybe one other thing I'll mention, which maybe Amro didn't know about, is so I'm a professor, yes, at UC Berkeley, but I'm also actually an employee. Starting about 14 months ago, last year, June, I'm also a research scientist at Google. So I spend 1 day a week working at Google, and then I'm also full-time working at the university. So anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions and talk about whatever anyone wants to talk about. So I'm gonna let me know how you want to proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. So that was a really brief and interesting introduction. So my next question is, I'm basically going to ask you questions and then you can answer them so we can get something fruitful and inspiring out of this whole interview. So my next question is, you're always interested in computer science. As I heard from your other interviews, you started being interested in computer science when you were little with video games, right? So were your parents, and especially your family in general, someone around you, people around you, supportive of your dreams at the time, or did they want you to take a different career path? Was everyone supportive and happy about your dreams?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my parents are maybe not, they're not like typical Ethiopian parents. I think typical Ethiopian parents are usually very strict. My parents have never been strict, actually. Like as a child, the last time I remember ever being punished as a child, maybe I was 4 years old. So they usually let me do whatever I wanted. I played a lot of video games. My parents bought me a Nintendo Entertainment System to play video games at home for my 4th birthday. And when I was younger, I used to say I wanted to be. If you ask me what do you want to be when you grow up, there's a question in the chat. Did I grow up in Ethiopia? No, I grew up in the Caribbean, so not too far from Cuba or Jamaica or these places. And I'm actually in the Caribbean right now. I don't know if I can try and show you. I don't know. Can you see? Can you see the ocean in the back? Is it visible?
Wow, that looks amazing.
Yeah. So this is where I'm from.
Okay.
And this is where I grew up anyway. So yeah, my parents were not very strict. They let I changed what I wanted to be. Like when I was really little, I used to say that I want to be emperor of the world. And then later, I think I said I wanted to be a medical doctor. And then later I said I wanted to do computer science. And when I was in maybe grade 7, I think grade 7, I got really interested in making websites. So I bought a couple books on how to make websites, and I used to give myself homework, like making example websites. And then when I was in high school, when I was in 12th grade, I got really interested in programming, and I bought books on C and C++, and I basically read the books and gave myself more homework to make programs. But my parents, they never made me do my homework, or they never asked me like, what do you have to do for school? They just let me do whatever I wanted to do. In fact, I was a very I didn't like to leave the house that much when I was a kid. I just like to stay home and basically play video games, and also like do these extra things like teach myself programming and things like that. I used to do some extracurricular activities, like I used to play piano. I used to do martial arts. I used to do taekwondo and ninjutsu. And I used to do these like competitions. So we had, in my high school, we had like a science bowl competition where, you have like buzzers and you have to buzz it as fast as you can to answer before other people. And they used to ask you science questions. And then we had another one, which was not science. We had one, which was like general knowledge, like Jeopardy trivia. There's another competition I used to do, which was basically like law. I mean, like Hig, so they would try to teach you, we were just in high school, but they would try to teach us some law. And then they would give us a case, like kind of like debate. And you had to argue the case, like either for it or against it, using the law that you had learned. So I did that when I was in 12th grade. But, I didn't really like to go to parties or anything like that. In fact, I remember when I was in high school, my parents used to say, Jelani, why are you at home? It's Friday night. You should go out partying or something. I mean, this is my parents telling me this. And I used to say, no, I'm not interested. So yeah, my parents were not strict at all. They were like the opposite of strict. Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. Okay, moving on to, you're lucky, okay. Moving on to my next question. What do you believe is the one key thing that contributed to make you the person you are today, other than hardworkingness and practice? What do you think is that one thing that really contributed to make you the person you are today?
I don't know about one thing. I mean, there were a few things. Like my parents were very supportive. They were not strict, but they they let me pursue whatever I wanted to pursue. If I told them I'm interested in computers, they bought me a computer. They were generally supportive, and they were willing to, like, I guess in Ethiopia and the U.S. it's different. In the U.S. university is very expensive. In Ethiopia, I think it's basically free, or like as long as you do some government service, maybe it'll be free for you. So, but like I didn't in the U.S. A lot of students take out loans to be able to pay for their tuition. Like my parents, financially supported me, so I never had to worry about that. They paid for all of my schooling. And then my school, when I was a child, I went to the same school from grade 1 to grade 12, and it was a religious school. And I feel like that school taught us a lot of discipline, which was very valuable, and had a very good kind of academic environment. So they really promoted, it was cool. You watch these movies, these American movies, and in American movies, like, they make it sound like it's not cool to be a smart kid. If you're smart, you're a geek, you're a nerd, you're not cool. If you want to be cool, you should play football or basketball or something. I mean, my school was not like that at all. In my school, no, the school was not in Addis, it was in the Caribbean. In my school, it was cool to be a good student. I mean, that's how, like, that was probably making you more cool than anything else. So I never had to run into any kind of bullying or any negative, any kind of negative interaction. And it also taught a lot of discipline. Our school was very strict, when the principal walks into the classroom, you have to stop what you're doing and stand up and greet her, good morning, Mrs. Brady. And, if your shirt is not tucked into your pants, the school can suspend you, send you home. You cannot wear sneakers. You have to wear dress shoes or boots, and you have to wear a brown or black belt. You have to wear green pants. No jeans are allowed. It has to be dress pants. It has to be a button-down white shirt. So I feel like the discipline from my school was very helpful. I don't know what it's like in Ethiopian high schools. But yeah, American schools, sometimes there are discipline problems, but luckily I didn't have to deal with that.
Well, I do understand how amazing that can be, because I also go to the same type of school, a religious, very strict school, but that's really amazing because it really does contribute to who I am today. So that's amazing.
Out of curiosity, what school is that? Are you all from the same school? Or are you from, like, the people in this call, are people from different places or the same place?
No, we're from different places, different parts of Ethiopia, but I think most of us are from Addis. I go to Nazareth School.
Okay.
So all of us are from different schools and cities.
Okay.
So my next question is, how do you view what you're doing and who you are today? And standing on the present day, what goals do you have for the future? Do you think you've already contributed enough or did enough? Or do you have more future plans and do you want to contribute more? What's your future plan and how do you view your current self and your current accomplishments?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've done things in different disjoint areas. So on the one hand, I do research, which means I come up with new things, right? So research fundamentally is about discovering new knowledge for humanity, right? So for example, in high school, you all will learn you learn calculus, you learn like what is an integral, what is a derivative, you learn sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. I mean, who even first thought of sine and cosine? Who thought of the derivative or the integral and all these things that you're learning? So ultimately, it's like people discovered those things, right? Like physics class, you learn about gravity. You probably heard about Newton, basically discovering gravity and modeling it mathematically. So all of that is basically research, right? Research is this practice of like coming up with new things. So I do that as a professor. I do that. I come up with new things. I come up with new algorithms that computers use to solve various problems. And so one part of me, in terms of accomplishments, I guess one kind of set of accomplishments relates to that, basically coming up with new research, new algorithms. Another one is, I guess, is educational. So I teach both at the university level, like university classes, and then I also teach in programs like Oddie's Coder, and we started a new program this summer in Jamaica called Jam Coders, which follows the similar syllabus to Oddie's Coder. I also teach outside the classroom in other ways, like I mentor students. So I've mentored master's students, I've mentored PhD students, I've mentored bachelor students in research. So in order for, when you do a PhD, the main thing in your PhD is to do research and write a thesis, a PhD thesis. And when you do that, you have to have an advisor, and that advisor will be a professor. So I've been an advisor for many students for their PhDs. I've already graduated 3 PhD students, and I'm currently advising 4 more PhD students right now. I've also advised what they call postdoctoral research fellows. So these are people who recently finished their PhD, and now they want kind of additional research experience, but it's on a time-limited basis, maybe for 1 year, for 2 years. So I've hosted postdocs at the university, and I've mentored them as well. So that's another part of what I do is teaching. And I guess more recently, I also have, I guess, one foot in industry. I mentioned that I'm working at Google 1 day a week. So, as a professor, when I do research, it's very theoretical. But working 1 day a week at a company like at Google, I get to see how these algorithms are used in the real world, and I get to work with other people at Google to implement these things and use them for real applications. So that's the third thing. I guess in terms of where I'm going in the future, I think now I'm pretty, I still see myself, in the future, I see myself contributing in these 3 different domains, research, teaching, and more applied contributions, like possibly through industry, for example. I'm not really sure what else. I mean, there are other goals like, goals outside of my job, like being a parent. So I currently have 2 children, and maybe we'll have more children. And that also takes a lot of my time. My daughter is 4, my son is 2. So being a dad is time consuming as well. What else? Anything else I can say? And about the questions in the chat, is it a bad idea to major in computer science, I guess, in college if you have no experience before college? No, I don't think it's a bad idea. It's not required to have prior experience in order to be a computer science major in college. I think it is helpful though. Like if you do have the opportunity to get that experience, and these days, that opportunity is easily accessible online. I think it doesn't hurt to do it.
Okay, how astonishing. So my next question would be, sorry. Did you learn you definitely learned something from your Addis Coder experience, but did you learn something about yourself through that program? Did you discover some new habits or some new things about yourself? Did you learn something new about your country? So what did you learn from your Addis Coder experience?
Yeah, I guess from the first experience, I I got a better sense of what speed and what topics I should go at because, as I mentioned, I was teaching more advanced computer science, like university level computer science topics. But these were high school students who almost none of them had any prior programming experience. So I think the very first summer in 2011, I tried to cover too much too fast. It was going too fast, I think. And then for the future summers, I slowed it down a little bit, just to keep it at a speed where students could more easily follow along and benefit from the coursework. Learning about Ethiopia, I definitely learned a lot about Ethiopia because prior to that, I never lived in Ethiopia. I just have my mom is from Addis Ababa. My wife is from Addis Ababa. I have family that lives in Ethiopia. I have family outside Addis. I have a lot of family in Bahir Dar, for example. I have one uncle in Dredwa. I probably have some other relatives in other cities as well. But I didn't really have a full picture of the whole country. I mean, Ethiopia is a big country, and one thing that's nice about Addis Coder is I get to see like all of Ethiopia in the students, right? So now we work, as I mentioned, we work with the Ministry of Education to select students from all over the country. The vast majority, more than 90%, are not from Addis Ababa. So we have students from Benishangul, we have students from Gambela, we have students from Jimma, from all over Oromia, all over Tigray, all over everywhere. So and a lot of them are not even from cities; they're from like more rural areas as well. So I really got to learn more about the country by meeting and interacting with these students from all over the place.
Okay, that's amazing. I also think that Addis Coder doesn't only teach you computer science, but diversity and social skills. So it's amazing. Um, so if you were not involved in the computer science field, or what would you do if you didn't have your current profession? Like, did you have any other passion other than computer science and teaching as a child? What would you have been if you weren't a professor or a teacher or engaged in computer science?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I used to say doctor. I mentioned that I did that competition, the law competition. Maybe I like to come up with. I like to debate, so maybe I could have been a lawyer. I don't really know. It's hard to say, but yeah, I mean, you mentioned the social aspects and developing social skills in Addis Coder. I mean, not just me, but even for the students themselves. We had a lot of students. We have a lot of students in Addis Coder who had never really left their hometown or their home region, right? So even for them, it was a big social learning experience. So students from Somali region who had never left Somali, and now they're meeting students from Dese, and it's I think even for the students it was like a new cultural experience, and also our teaching assistants. Addis Coder recruits TAs from all over the world. So half our TAs, our teaching assistants, are from Ethiopia, but the other half are from everywhere. We've recruited TAs from Brazil, Poland, Israel, Russia, Iran, France, South Korea, the United States, Canada, Greece. I could keep going on and on, but Romania, London. We've had people from basically all over the place. And I think for everyone involved, it's like an interesting cultural experience where those people coming from abroad get to see a new country. They get to see Ethiopia, and then the students, and they get to see each other, right? Because they're each from different places, and then the students get to meet people from all over the world too. So yeah. So maybe I'll just also answer some of the questions I see in the chat. The most challenging thing I went through my life in college, maybe the most challenging thing was like the academics itself, because for me, I was always a very strong student in school, like before college, let's say before I graduated high school. You know, I didn't, to be honest, I didn't work very hard before university. So like I was pretty fast. I would learn things very easily. And when we had homework, I would do the homework. You know, I would finish all my homework in like 5 minutes or in 10 minutes. Whenever the teachers gave me an exam, I used to finish the exam in 10 minutes. So, you know, I always thought school was very easy. But then when I went to MIT, you know, the MIT courses were significantly more challenging, and the students were like the strongest students from all over the world. So, you know, there's more competition. So I really started working hard when I got to college, when I got to MIT. That was like the first time in my life that I felt like I really had to work really hard. Will iDiscover continue? I hope so. The plan is to bring it back next summer, to attend iDiscover. The only requirement is that you be a high school student living in Ethiopia. There's been, I think, even the living in Ethiopia part, there's been one exception. Like, you know, there's some high schools abroad, like I forgot what it's called. It's the Leadership Academy, ALA, Africa Leadership Academy. And then there are some of these UWC schools in other countries that some Ethiopian students go to in 11th and 12th grade. So we have in the past, we've allowed those students to also apply, but very few. The vast majority of our students, almost all our students, live in Ethiopia, and they're in an Ethiopian high school. Were the students in Addis in dorms? Yes. So now we've been working with Amiskilo, AIT. This is Addis Ababa University engineering campus in Addis Ababa. They provide us with dorms for the students. So, and it's free. And the food also is free. Everything about the program is free for the students. What skills should someone possess to be a good computer scientist besides coding? I think logical thinking and kind of thinking mathematically is very important in computer science. And I think also, there are also other soft skills that are very important. Like if you want to be a software engineer, you know, you want to work at Google or, you know, or basically any kind of software engineering job, it really is a team effort. You know, it's usually not like one person wrote all the code for Gmail. No, there are probably like hundreds of people who participated in that project as software engineers. So you need to have good presentation skills. You need to have good like communication skills because you're going to be working in a team. You need to have good teamwork skills. So these soft skills are also very important. Yeah, any other questions?
I have another question.
Yes.
Where do you see Ethiopia's tech and science in the next 10 to 20 years? You have contributed a lot to the technology sector of Ethiopia. So where do you see Ethiopia's tech and science in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, the next 10 to 20 years, it's hard for me to predict. I mean, my engagement with, you know, in Ethiopia has been at the high school level, right? So it's very different from what goes on at the, you know, after you graduate university and you start working. But, you know, over the course of running iDiscover for many years, I've met a lot of people in Ethiopia who are investors or who are software engineers in Ethiopia. And it seems that there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of growth. And, you know, I've also met many people in the government during my time there, and they also prioritize investing, you know, like the nation, as a nation, Ethiopia investing in training people in computer science and technology. In fact, you know, I think now it's been in place for many years, but I remember when it was announced that the university would reserve something like, was it 75% or 80% of all university students in Ethiopia basically have to major in like some STEM field, right? Like engineering or science or something like that. So, you know, the government is definitely very keen on investing in technology. So I think you're going to see a lot of good things. In Addis Coder, we, aside from teaching the students computer science, we also usually have a career day. And at the career day, we invite people who have computer science related jobs in Ethiopia to come the head of INSA. This is like the National, Information Network Security Agency, I think, from the government. We've had other people from the government, like the Ministry of Science and Technology. We've had someone who now is, later became the IT advisor to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. We had someone who later became chief of staff for the Prime Minister, and now is the new head of INSA. We've had other people who created companies. So maybe people have heard of Ride, the Ride app on the phone, right? It's kind of like Uber in Ethiopia. So we have the founder and CEO of Zayride, which is another kind of ride app in Ethiopia. We've had we had someone fly in from Kenya who was a research scientist at IBM Research in Kenya. We've had other startup founders who flew in from Kenya. So I think there's a lot going on. So I think there's a bright future in computer science and technology in Ethiopia.
So my other question is, you specialize in sketching and streaming algorithms, and you've said something and give us some information on other interviews, but what is sketching and streaming algorithms and why is it useful?
Yeah, so it's like a sketch of a data set. So you have data, right? Like data could be, all the Google searches someone did ever, or all the transactions, you buy and sell stuff online, all that, the logs of all the transactions, all of that is information, it's all data. So you have all this data that's coming at you. People are constantly buying new things. So you're seeing more and more data. And a sketch of that data is like a compression of it, a compressed representation that still lets you answer interesting questions about the data. And then a streaming algorithm is an algorithm that maintains the sketch dynamically as the data is being updated. So as you see more and more data, the streaming algorithm can keep updating the sketch to keep it up to date. And the goal here really is to use as little memory as possible, right? So maybe like your computer, inside your computer, there's a CPU, the central processing unit, there's a hard drive, there's RAM, right? RAM is like the memory of the computer. And these are finite resources. Your computer doesn't have infinite RAM, it doesn't have infinite hard drive. Its CPU is only so powerful, it only has so many gigahertz or whatever. So really, like my research is about the memory, more about the memory aspect. Like, how do you come up with algorithms that use very little memory? And also to answer a question in the chat about how do people get notified when the application is open for Addis Coder, yes, it is posted on the website. Also, we announced it on Addis Coder has a Facebook page, a Twitter page, and an Instagram page. So twitter.com/AddisCoder, facebook.com/AddisCoder, instagram.com/AddisCoder. So if you follow us on social media, you will see when we post it, when it's available.
Okay. My next question is, who is role model?
Yeah, I guess I was asked this question, like I did this interview many years ago with Solomon Kasa from EBS Tech Talk with Solomon Kasa. And I think at that time I said that my role model was my cousin. I have a cousin named Indanchi. Indanchi Elam is actually her name. And actually after I said that, my mom got mad at me. She said, "No, Jelani, you're supposed to say that I'm your role model. I'm your mom." So of course I love my mom. My mom is, I have many role models for different reasons. So I think my mom was a very good mom. So that way she's like a role model for how to be a good parent. My dad as well. Indanchi is still, I consider, like a role model. I think she has like very good behavior. She's never upset. She's always calm. She's like very religious and loves God. So like I've always viewed her as like a role model in terms of like how I should live my life and how my behavior should be. I still feel that way. I think that's maybe more important than other things. It's more important than like being a professor at Harvard or anything like that. Is being a good person. So for that, she's still a role model of mine. I don't know. It's hard for me to answer more than that. I see a question in the chat. What advice would you give someone who aspires to major in computer science, considering the challenges? I guess maybe one question is like, which challenges do you mean? So, I mean, sometimes people when they're first starting off, they find it hard. Like some of the concepts are hard, but I think in my experience, and I found it hard too. Some of it I found it hard in the beginning. I think just the more you practice, the better you get. And as I mentioned, there are lots of resources online. There are lots of websites that would like practice problems, lessons, videos on YouTube, videos on other websites like MIT OpenCourseWare, Coursera, or edX. So I think if you really just work hard and find a community of other people who are interested and talk to each other about what you're learning together, it can be fun. So I think, I guess that's the advice I would give. Any more questions?
Okay. How would you describe your time at MIT as an undergraduate student? What were your expectations, and did your experience there meet your expectations, or were you disappointed, surprised? How did you find your time there?
Yeah, I really loved my time at MIT. I enjoyed it a lot. When I applied to MIT as a grade 12 student, I actually had never heard of MIT before. I found out about MIT in 12th grade. And then I actually only applied to MIT. I didn't apply to any other university. I applied early action. So I found out that I got accepted early. And then once I found that out, I knew I wanted to go there. So there was no reason to finish my regular action, my regular decision applications to anywhere else. But once I got there, I didn't really know what to expect. Like, I guess, sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So I had taught myself a little bit of computer science, and I had a computer science class in high school where in 12th grade, I had a teacher who taught us some programming in the basic programming language. And I knew like high school math, right? I knew algebra and geometry and calculus, but I didn't really know what university level mathematics was. Like I had never heard of abstract algebra and finite fields and Galois theory and topology and real analysis and complex analysis and algebraic geometry and all these manifolds. I never heard of any of that stuff. So when I got to MIT, I was kind of like a baby, like when a baby enters the world and they don't know anything and they just look around and everything looks new. I mean, I was kind of like that when I got to MIT. And it took me a little bit of time to adjust and to like that, the professors were very nice and the other students were also very, very nice and supportive. So I made a lot of good friends who are still my friends now. And I learned a lot. You can never run out of stuff to learn at MIT because there are just so many courses. Even if you like double up and take twice as many courses every semester as you're supposed to, you're still like not going to learn. There's still going to be a whole lot of stuff that you didn't get a chance to learn at MIT because there's just so much there. What's better to major in, CS or software engineering? To be honest with you, like in the United States, usually, I mean, I know in Ethiopia there are these different options, right? You can major in electrical engineering or software engineering or computer science or information tech, IT. In the US, we don't really have all these divisions. Usually it's just like computer science, that's it. Sometimes you'll also have electrical and computer engineering. So to be honest, I don't know how to answer that question because in the US system, we don't really have that division between CS and software engineering. So my advice to you would maybe be like to ask the university, what's the difference between these two to help you to choose. And I think, my understanding too is like, if you look at Addis Ababa University, computer science is actually offered at Arat Kilo and software engineering is actually offered in the engineering campus in Amis Kilo. So they're like completely different. But again, I don't have a very good understanding of what the difference is in Ethiopia in terms of what the courses are going to be different, how they're going to be different. What do I recommend for students struggling with their studies? I think ask for help. Ask other students. Don't be shy to ask questions. So sometimes, in general, sometimes when a student is struggling, they get shy to ask questions because they feel like if they ask questions, people are going to think that they're not smart, or they feel like if they ask questions, they're going to bother the other person, and they don't want to bother that person. But I think in reality, you have to ask questions, and ask other students, ask the professor. I don't know in Ethiopia if it's very common to have office hours, but in the U.S., most professors have office hours, which means like there's 1 or 2 hours every week where they sit in their office and they just wait for students to come in, and any student can come in and just like ask them any question they want. So take advantage of that. What advice can you give to high schoolers as you're about to start your bigger journey in life? Again, maybe this is related to ask lots of questions and be aggressive about your own education and your own trajectory, and work hard. What else can I say?
Okay, so my last question is, what is your ultimate career goal that you want to accomplish, or that you think that you've already accomplished?
Yeah, I've never really had any career goals in my life. I never really said, oh, I really want to become a professor or a Harvard professor or UC Berkeley professor. I just, I just liked computer science, so I just did it because I liked it. And, when I graduated from PhD, I thought about what kind of job do I want, and I was like, well, I like teaching, I like research. So I applied to some companies that do research. I also applied to universities to be a professor, and they offered me the job at Harvard, so I took the job. Goals have been more like find a good partner to marry, who I did. I got married 5 years ago, have many children, be a good father. These are more my goals than not really career stuff.
One last question. So my last question would be, so you're a world-class professor with, lots of acknowledgements, but you decided to come here in Ethiopia and help high schoolers who are really interested in computer science other than doing other business or, something that would be more beneficial to you. And why was that? Why did you want to help these students?
Yeah, I think what was in my mind at the time was, I didn't do a whole lot of volunteering in my life before that. When I was in high school, there was something called the National Honor Society, and I remember in order to join that society, I had to do kind of one volunteer activity, but it was not a big commitment. I think I did it in one day, and that was it. And also, when I was in university, I joined 2 different honor societies. I joined an engineering honor society, and I joined a computer science honor society, and both of those also involved some amount of volunteer, like community service volunteering, but they were not very time-consuming either. But I think volunteering was not historically like a big part of my life. But then there were 3 other students at MIT who were older than me, and they started a program before IDScoder, much before IDScoder, called AITI. It was called the MIT AITI. It was the MIT Africa IT Initiative. And they would recruit MIT students to go to visit various African universities. So they had a partnership with Addis Ababa University. They also had a partnership with, I think, a university in Rwanda, maybe also one in Uganda, and I forgot what other countries that they operated in. But they would send MIT students there to teach university students some computer science skills as well as entrepreneurship. So they were really trying to teach students how to start companies, how to start their own software companies. And I didn't do that program myself, but I had friends who did that program. So I was aware of it. And I think in the back of that, because I was aware of it, it was like in the back of my mind. I always thought, oh, that's a really cool program, but I didn't do anything myself. And then when I was graduating my PhD, somehow I remembered them. I was like, oh, there was this AITI program. Like I was thinking, like, what should I do this summer? Let me go to Addis Ababa. Let me visit my uncle and my cousins and stuff. Oh, well, while I'm there, what else should I do? And then I remembered AITI, and I thought, oh, that was a really cool program, AITI, that they started. My experience is not as much about entrepreneurship. It's more about like, more like theoretical stuff, research, algorithms. So instead of entrepreneurship, let me teach what I know, which is, let me teach algorithms. And at that time, at first, actually, my plan was not to teach high school students. My plan was to teach university students, and I was going to teach like advanced, like graduate level, like PhD level courses at the university. But the problem is at the time, I didn't know anyone at the university. So to set it up was hard. Like I didn't know who should I ask, who should I email. I was Googling and trying to find, email addresses of random people at the university to ask them, can I do this? Can you let me use your classroom? Can you advertise this to the university students? But it was a little bit hard for me to organize because I didn't know anyone. And then I pivoted and I thought, okay, well, let me, if I can't get it operating at Addis Ababa University, then let me try high schools, because there are lots of high schools in Addis Ababa. So even if some high schools say no, or even if some high schools don't respond, maybe the other high schools will let me do it. So I pivoted to a high school. I was really thinking about it from my own perspective, like, Jelani, what's a program that you wish existed for you, for me? What's a program I wish existed for myself when I was a kid, when I was in high school? And I was like, oh, I really wish that someone had taught me algorithms in high school, because it's really cool, and it would have gotten me even more interested in computer science. So I decided to make that kind of program for high school students. And someone asked in the chat, what was it like organizing the first batch of students? And it was very difficult at first. Eventually, the university let me use their classroom for free, and they also let me use their computer lab for free. But the main thing was, how do I get the students? Like, how do I advertise the program to students so the students are aware of it and sign up? So I got 2 of the big radio stations in Addis to advertise Addis Coder for free. Shagat FM and Afro FM gave me free advertising. I made a website. I had some people in Addis print a flyer that I prepared, and they took the flyer to different high schools, such as Nazareth School, for example, but also other high schools all over the capital city. I got in touch with someone there's a university called NYU Abu Dhabi, which recruits a lot from Ethiopia. And they actually have a recruiter, like someone who was like working for them as a recruiter, who would help them advertise to high schools in Ethiopia and Addis Ababa specifically. So I was introduced to that recruiter, and because she was a recruiter, she knew a lot of high schools. She knew a lot of teachers and principals. So I asked her, can you tell people about my program, Addis Coder? So she did that also for free, just to help us. So that's mainly the way it went the first time. And then, of course, the second time onward, we started working with the Ministry of Education. And just looking again at some of the chat questions, what is my expectation for Addis Coder? What is the impact that I want to leave in the youth? I think I just want them to get excited, be more aware of what computer science is, and get them excited about computer science, because especially, I mentioned a lot of our students are not from Addis. We have a lot of students from rural parts of Ethiopia. And especially for them, they really have not been exposed to computer science that much, and they don't really know what the opportunities are. A lot of them, the really strong students, they just really, they know about medicine. Their family encourages them to study medicine, or maybe encourages them to study engineering. But many of them, their parents don't encourage them to study computer science. So I think what Addis Coder does a good job of is just educating the students about, like, what is computer science, show them that it's fun. We have those career days where we bring in people to talk to them about job opportunities. Like, they can see that, oh, I can actually get a pretty good salary working as a software engineer in Ethiopia. So that's I guess one concrete measurable impact that we've had. Can rising university freshmen join next summer in Addis Coder? They cannot join as students, but they can apply to be a teaching assistant. So the students must be high school students. They must have graduated either 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. But if you're older, if you're already in university, then you can apply to be a teaching assistant. Any final? I guess we're almost at the 1 hour mark. Any final questions?
So I don't have any other questions. I mean, my team didn't prepare any other questions, but I personally have one more question. So what were the most devastating challenges you faced throughout your career, your computer science career? What were the most devastating challenges that you faced? And how did you get through them?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I've had ones that are like truly devastating. I mean, I had some challenges, like I mentioned when I got to MIT. Before that, in high school, school was always super easy for me, and I didn't have to work very hard. And then when I got to MIT, I thought that, oh, this is very challenging, and I had to work a lot harder. So I mean, that was a challenge. And in high school, even though I was not working hard in high school, I would always get like A's and A pluses. And then at MIT, like my first semester, I was luckily at MIT they had a policy where the first semester your grades don't matter. Basically, they just on your transcript it just shows P for pass if you pass. But if the grades were recorded, I think my first semester I was like going to get majority B's, and in my life I almost never got a B. So like it was very strange for me. So that's when I really realized that I think I even failed. I got an F on like 2 physics exams at MIT my very first semester. So I think that's when I realized like, oh, this is a lot more challenging than I'm used to, and I worked a lot harder. And then I did better after that. I returned to getting A's. And then another challenge I ran into was when my last year of university, my 4th year of university, I applied to the PhD program directly without doing a master's yet. And I was actually rejected I only applied to 2 PhD programs, and I was rejected from both of them. And that was also like a big eye opener. At that point in time, I actually had a perfect GPA. And I had taken a lot of PhD level courses, even as a bachelor's student. I was taking advanced courses, but I really didn't fully understand what the PhD was about and what it took to be accepted to a top PhD program. So then that's when I decided to do a master's degree for 1 year and then apply again the next year to PhD. And then I was accepted. But that was something that was, maybe it was not devastating because it worked out in the end, but at the time it was very scary. To go about doing research or to go about creating the club? Or learning how to teach. Yeah, I mean what I've found is that like in Addis Coder, for example, I mean a big part of being a good teacher I think is empathy, like putting yourself in the shoes of the students and trying to think like, what are the students thinking right now? Do the students understand what I'm talking about? Do they get it? Do they understand why this is important? Or sometimes you'll have a teacher go to the front of the class with their book and they just like write what's in the book on the board, or they just read from the book and it's not exciting, So, so actually, like when I teach, I never use the book. I never have the book with me. I don't even have any notes. I just teach. I just look at the students and I teach. I just talk to them, and I write on the board, but from my own practice and my own memory, or I'll project on the board from my laptop on the projector. But empathy is very important to explain the motivation. Like, why am I teaching you this? Why is this useful? Like, what are some real applications for why you might need to know this? And tell stories. People like stories, right? So tell stories from history, interesting stories of like how this thing was discovered, or anything that will get people like interested in listening to you. I think lecturing is also kind of like a performance. It's your part of your job is to also keep the audience entertained. And I guess other question, I was looking at the chat. Can I make Addis Coder? Oh, yeah. Did I answer your question? Okay. So can I make Addis Coder virtual next time? Unfortunately, I think that's not a good option for Addis Coder, just because, as I mentioned, the majority of our students are actually from very rural parts of Ethiopia. I mean, when I say rural, Gutad, right? Gutad. So a lot of them don't have internet at home. They don't have a laptop. So it's very hard for them to participate virtually. So that's why it's important that we do it in person. But even if it's far, it shouldn't matter if it's far, because it's a camp. So we're gonna give you a dorm. You're gonna get all your meat, breakfast, lunch, and dinner is free. So it's a summer camp. So you just need to make the trip twice: once to come to Addis, and then a month later to go back. What do I enjoy doing in my spare time? Now that I'm in the Caribbean, when I'm here, I like to swim. So I was at the beach yesterday, probably the day before that, and the day before that. So I go to the beach every day and swim. We have very nice beaches. In California, I like to spend time with my children. I like to take them to the park and walk. We have a very nice lake near the city where I live. I like to walk around the lake. I like to play card games, especially Dominion, and another board game. I used to play a lot of board games like Settlers of Catan, other so-called German-style board games. I like to travel. So, this summer, I've been to the Caribbean twice. So now I'm in the Virgin Islands. I was in Jamaica. I went to London this summer. In a few weeks, I'm going to go to Los Angeles, and then I'm going to go to France. And I went to Boston. I'm going to go to Singapore and Bangladesh later this fall. Where else am I going? I don't really remember. I'm going to a lot of places. So I like to travel. I like to cook. I like to make Ethiopian food. I make my own injera myself. So I prepare the leet. I make the absit. I do everything. I make the injera, twice a week in our house. It's actually funny, my wife is from Addis Ababa, and her mom is from Addis Ababa. I taught my wife's mom how to make injera. She didn't know all the steps exactly. People laugh because I grew up here and she grew up in Ethiopia. What else do I like to do? I like to bake. I like to make baklava. I make my own baklava. I make cake. I make brownies. Yeah. What else? I like to grow things. I'm a little bit of a farmer. I grow lettuce. I grow tomatoes. I grow other fruits. We have a lemon tree. We have passion fruit. We grow peppers, karia. We grow onions. We've grown potatoes. We grow other spices. Yeah. So I like to do that too. Okay, any other questions?
So I don't have any more questions, nor does my team. But ሌሎቻችሁ ጥያቄዎች ካላችሁ feel free to put it in the chat box or unmute አድርጋችሁ መጠየቅ ትችላላችሁ። ያሉ አይመስለኝም። ከሌሉ is there any last thing that you want to say? የመጨረሻ statement, Professor?
Last statement, I guess someone just asked me in the chat, what advice would you give your younger self? I mean, I don't know. I guess my childhood went very well, I think. I had a very happy childhood. I learned a lot. I was not too stressed. So I'm not sure that I would have done anything differently. I mean, for me, as I mentioned, it was, I'm Christian. It was very important for me to, I value, for me, living my life in a way that I feel honors God is much more important than my career. I guess maybe one advice is like don't lose sight of what's important. You know, your character, your reputation, your behavior, like these are, I think, more important things than you know, you're making a lot of money or having a very, you know, honorable job or something like this. I mean, there are lots of people who are professors who are bad people, right? I mean, you know, lots of people who work in companies who are bad people, like who act in immoral ways, or you probably have heard of, you hear about this, like even at Harvard, you hear about Harvard, you know, like a professor gets fired because they were trying to date their student, or, you know, or like someone gets fired because they took a bribe to try and like get a student accepted into the university, even though they shouldn't have been accepted, or, you know, all kinds of corruption or whatever. Like, you know, just because you're a professor at Harvard, or just because you're a CEO of a company making millions of dollars, it doesn't mean that you're living your life in a good way. So I think, like, to me, for me personally, that's more important. It's like making sure that you're living your life in an honorable and good way. Any final things?
በጣም ደስ የሚል አሜዚንግ ታይም ነበረኝ። ብዙ ነገሮች እኔም ተምሬበታለሁ፣ ሌሎቻችንም ብዙ ነገር እንደተማርበት አልጠራጠርም። በጣም አስደሳች ጊዜ ነበረኝ። እጅግ በጣም አድርጌ አመሰግናለሁ። እዚህ ስለተገኙ ፈቃደኛ ሆነው ከኛ ጋር ይህን ኢንተርቪው ስላደረጉ በጣም አመሰግናለሁ። እና ይሄ የመጨረሻ ሴሽናችን ነው፣ የሙሉ የካምፓችን የመጨረሻ ሴሽን ነው። so it's the grand closing። ስለዚህ ሁላችሁንም ለማመስገን ፈልጋለሁ። በአጠቃላይ በቴክኖኤልፒስ ቲምን ሙሉ በሙሉ በጣም ሃርድ ወርኪንግ እና ዌል ኮሚኒኬት የምታደርጉ ሰዎች ነበራችሁ። እያንዳንዳችሁን አሄል፣ መቅደስ፣ አዲል፣ ቤቲ፣ ሁላችሁንም እጅግ አድርጌ ማመስገን ፈልጋለሁ። ተማሪዎቻችንን በሙሉ ላመሰግን እወዳለሁ። ፕሮፌሰር ጀላኒ እርሶም ትልቅ ምስጋና ይገባዎታል። እዚህ ተገኝተው ይሄን ሁሉ ነገር ሼር ስላደረጉ ደስ የሚል ጊዜ ነበረኝ። በሚቀጥለው ዓመት እንደምንደግመው አልጠራጠርም። በጣም አመሰግናችኋለሁ። እዚህ ለተገኛችሁ በሙሉ ኦብዘርቨንት ገስቶችም ነበሩን። በጣም አመሰግናለሁ። ከሌሎች ለየት ባለ ደግሞ አከዩ አይ ዶንት ቲንክ እዚህ አለ፣ ግን ኢንስትራክተራችን ነበረ። በብዙ ነገሮች እጅግ የዳንና ከኛ ጋር የነበረ ሰው ነው። እጅግ አድርጌ ላመሰግነው ፈልጋለሁ። በጣም ብዙ ሰፖርት ያገኘነው ከሱ ነውና በጣም ላመሰግነው እወዳለሁ። ወጥቶ ነው ለሁላችሁም ምስጋና ይገባችኋል። እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልኝ።